Hello, my Bill 1000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one is titled Words. Hold on. Disturbing letter leads detectives to murderous house of horrors. The Hoa. I need to stop saying that. Sounds like I'm saying horror. Oh, shit. I'm not. I'm saying horror. Horror. Let's go ahead and get into this story. Go ahead. Turn them lights down low. Put on something comfy. Go up with something special. Let's get horrified. It's in the title.
Name one thing more turbulent than a hurricane or a bad relationship.
I was about to say, my old lady pissed off. Wait, these two? Oh. Fuck. Man. We know this story. We know this story quite well. We've done a couple of videos on it. And go figure, this was actually suggested to me by a subscriber. Now I know why it was suggested. I love it. Oh man, we're going to get to hear it from the Coffeehouse Crime version. Oh shit, you know what that means? It means we're going to be traumatized. I understand Coffeehouse Crime isn't for everyone, but I love Coffeehouse Crime. I truly do. So we do it. I'm excited.
While Hurricane Katrina battered the Gulf of Mexico and ripped New Orleans apart, two star-crossed lovers found their place together in the heart of the healing community. But as the floods disappeared and society went back to its normal routine, so did their troubled behaviours and habits. And soon enough, Zack and Addie found themselves back into very heated arguments. As their lifestyle and habits spiraled, so did their relationship. And despite trying to repair what they once had by moving in together, one of them was about to erupt in the most violent way possible. So, who were Zack Bowen and Addie Hall? What caused the two of them to battle almost daily? And how would all of this end?
Hey, I mean, if you listen to Ghost Adventures, it was demons. It was demons. But, I mean, honestly, from what I have learned in the many years I have been on this world, some people, even though they feel like they are amazing together and stuff like that, can be really toxic. And that's just how it goes. Like, you hear it all the time. Like, I was in a relationship for this long and they was abusive every day. And, you know, some relationships are just toxic. No matter how well you think you're doing, or, you know, you don't deserve better, everyone deserves better. No one deserves to be in something toxic like that. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to live your best life. You know, you get to be yah, bruh. You know what I mean?
Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name
What's
is
up,
Adrian.
Adrian?
And once again, you found yourself trapped.
Hey, Adrian!
Now, this story has to be one of the most horrific crimes out of New Orleans, and has created what is known as one of the most infamous...
New Orleans, bruh. New Orleans. New Orleans. Man, trying to pronounce things correctly, man. No, that's not how we do it in America, bruh. We don't say America either. We say America. That's not how you do it in America. You say New Orleans. New Orleans. Y'all say, get on over here.
haunted houses in the city. Hey, if you're not going to buy that coffee from me, then please at least hit that subscribe button. See it kind of like a Google rating. It's free and it's good for business. Also, just a general disclaimer here, but this story is not for the faint of heart. If that's okay with you, then let's proceed. So,
or for people who like to cook.
Grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Zack Bowen and Addie Hall.
Bro, okay, before we get into it, like, I said this on the, I believe, Mr. Ballin video we just did about this story. The top 3 photos with disturbing backstories. Shit. Oh, a subscriber came on there and was like, I don't know why y'all freaking out. It works for this place or whatever, that has like all the original stuff. I'm like, oh my God, think of how many heads have been in that motherfucker. Like, oh no. This is going to get fogged.
So, who here remembers Katrina? As many of you know, in August of 2005, Hurricane Katrina devastated the southern coast.
I don't remember a lot, but I remember that.
But for those of you outside of the United States, more than 1,800 people died throughout her destruction, with an estimated $186 billion worth of damage. No city was more destroyed and devastated by Katrina than New Orleans. In fact, its economy still suffers to this very day. Before Katrina, New Orleans had a population of 480,000 residents. 1 year later, it was 230,000. And even by the year 2020, which was 15 years after her destruction, it had only partially recovered to 390,000. The devastation was honestly cataclysmic. Entire neighborhoods were submerged underwater, buildings ripped away from their foundations, and parks turned into war zones.
Bro, it was like God himself was trying to destroy this place. Like, I've been alive for many a year, and I'm just going to say it. This was crazy. Like, I know there's probably been worse storms, but the ones that I remember, this was fucking crazy. So much death, and it wasn't just the storm, it was just a clusterfuck of shit that these poor people had to go through. Like, the storm was awful, but you know, when levees break and stuff like that, things go from bad to, oh fuck, we're gonna die really fast.
It's impossible to express how badly this city was annihilated. However, one supposedly sweet thing that emerged from this tragedy was a beautiful relationship between two young adults.
Bro, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, the most beautiful thing that came out of that was the community coming together and being there for one another. Like that was the most beautiful thing that came out of this whole situation, was the love that people have for each other, people risking everything to save other people. Like that's the only good thing that came out of this, is that refresh, defining humanity isn't lost feeling, you know?
You know how it goes. It is that classic trope. A phoenix relationship. Two damaged lovers rise from the ashes to fly into a relationship that burns heavy and bright, healthy and safe forevermore. Except it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that this rarely lasts, and this case is no different. At 8:30 p.m. on October the 17th, 2006, New Orleans police received a distressing phone call from a member of staff at the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel.
Look at the
puppy! They were calling to report a self-inflicted death. One of their guests had jumped from the hotel's rooftop bar, dropping more than 7
it's a horse.
floors
It's a
onto
puppy,
the garage
though.
below. And as you can likely imagine, the prognosis for this guest was not good. He had died shortly after impact.
Oh, fuck.
Detectives quickly determined who this man was. That is because, before jumping, he had placed a small plastic bag in his front pocket. Within this plastic bag was a key, a note, and his dog tags, indicating that he likely used to be part of the army. Now, the details behind his death were already seemingly ominous. But when officers opened the letter to look at what was written inside, they realized that this was only the beginning of a terrible and tragic story. So, the big question that all of you have here is, what was written in that note? Well, after unfolding the paper, officers
I'm gonna go ahead and tell you what was in the note. Nothing good.
realized that the note said, "This is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one I took. You need to visit my apartment, found at 826 North Rampart Street." Detectives knew that they would be in for a gruesome discovery after reading that letter. But who the victim was, or whereabouts in the apartment they could be found, was not yet clear.
I mean...
However, they did have a name and an address to work with, so with that in mind, they prepared themselves for whatever awaited at North Rampart Street. Dog tags were
a little bit of everywhere. I mean,
named him as 28-year-old Zack Bowen, and soon enough it was confirmed that he did in fact serve in the military. And as for his victim,
did he
well,
really?
things were not looking good for his partner. no one had heard from her in over 12 days. And so logic would tell you it was she he was referring to. But saying that, before we get into what officers found in Zack's apartment, let's first look at who he and his partner were. Beginning with Zack Bowen.
This is why I like Coffeehouse Crime. Like, we get into some nitty gritty shit. Like, we get backstory. We get, there's been a few times where we've watched Coffeehouse Crime and I've come out of it like, damn, like, I know this dude's a murderer and shit, but whoa, no wonder. Like, if I had to laugh like that, shit. You know what I mean? See, that is why I love Coffeehouse Crime so much. You get pulled into the story, and you, by the end of it, you are having a battle inside your own brain, and it's just, I love it. It's like, do I feel sorry for this piece of shit? A little bit, but damn, he deserves it in his butt the rest of his life by a big old, you know what I mean?
He was born on May the 15th, 1978, in Bakersfield, California. From the beginning, his childhood seemed to be riddled with depression. Unfortunately, Zack struggled to deal with his low self-esteem and mood throughout the years, and this would also follow him into teenagerhood. When he was 12 years old, Zack moved to New Orleans to live with his father, switching high schools in the process. Unfortunately, his grades were nothing special, but he didn't seem to mind so much about that. And so, at the age of 18, that is when Zack began to work as a bartender. He felt comfortable in this environment, and although the pay wasn't too great, it was a relatively easy and sociable job.
You can work as a bartender at 18?
Eventually meet another woman named Lana. Lana was considerably older than he was, but the two would eventually marry and then even have children. As a result, he joined the military to better support his growing family, touring Iraq and Kosovo in the process. It was noted that during his service, he was even awarded several medals for his actions. Sadly though, Zack would see some very heavy stuff during this time. It is even claimed that, while on tour, he had witnessed the deaths of many Iraqis, both military and civilian. And in fact, one of his most violent memories included watching an entire family get bombed. To make matters even worse, he had even befriended that family in the weeks prior. As many of you know, this can lead to extreme cases of PTSD, more formally known as post-traumatic stress disorder in veterans. I'm going to park this part of the story here for now, but we'll get back to this later. Now, instead of leaving with an honourable discharge, Zack would ultimately leave with a general discharge, which he viewed as a personal failure. He really did seem to take this to heart, and others commented about how often he felt ashamed. And as a direct consequence of this discharge, he did not qualify for any compensation afterwards. Concerningly, that was not the only observation made by friends and family. Zack seemed like a completely different person after returning from Iraq. His personality, behaviour patterns, and general mood all seemed to take quite the negative turn, and unfortunately, this would lead to him and Lana divorcing. The divorce naturally left him heartbroken, until one day he would unexpectedly bump into the next and final love of his life. It was in July of 2005, and during a bartending shift in the French Quarter of New Orleans, that Zack would meet a woman named Adrienne Hall. The two of them hit it off almost immediately, and before they knew it, they were newfound lovers. Now, Adrienne, or Addie for short, was a feisty lady more than 2 years his senior. She too was a bartender, and she too had some baggage. It is reported that Addie suffered from bipolar disorder, and she would often abuse her medication, causing rather severe fluctuations in her mood. But that aside, she was an extraordinarily creative person. Addie loved to dance, make art, write poetry, and spend most of her time in the French quarters. In fact, she would often call herself a Puerto Rican. Much like Zack, Addie routinely abused alcohol and sometimes even drugs, and so you can imagine exactly what kind of relationship that these two were getting into. Both of them were damaged, and in addition to this, neither of them knew how to regulate themselves at a healthy level. As a result, their excitement and so-called love for each other was beyond explosive. Many of their mutual friends remember the two getting into very tumultuous arguments. Their relationship was absolutely turbulent. And that was before Hurricane Katrina hit. Only a few weeks later, reports of a Category 5 hurricane emerged, and with almost no time to spare, America braced itself for what could potentially be one of the worst hurricanes in modern-day history. And oh boy, if only the fear-mongering media knew that the deathly claims were right on the money.
Right?
On Wednesday the 24th of August, a hurricane warning was announced along Florida's coastline. By Thursday, talk of a Category 1 hurricane began. That turned to Category 2 by Friday, and then Category 3 on Saturday. Officials urged those in New Orleans to exit, with traffic jams of up to 18,000 cars an hour blocking the highways. By Sunday, those who were left behind were told to prepare for a Category 5. By Monday, August the 28th, more than 80% of the city was now underwater. Power, drinking water, and essential utilities were all destroyed. People were stranded on rooftops, and thousands were feared to be dead. Despite this, Zack and Addie remained in the city for all of it. The two fell in love among all of this destruction, devastation, and chaos. Yeah. And not only did they survive, but they also decided to work together to help other survivors with food and booze. The two quickly created a bonfire in the middle of their street and cooked food for all of those who came by. Their local community knew them as good humanitarians, and all of a sudden, the two became a glimmering beacon of hope for the rest of the city. Apparently, Addie was known to show her breasts to all police officers who came by, but this could simply be just a dumb rumor. She and Zack were known for making unforgettable cocktails for the people of New Orleans during this storm, and people came near and far for their drinks. Their charitable efforts even appeared in both local and national newspapers, feeding into their ego as a so-called power couple who had recently fallen in love and now have a combined purpose. You could say that things were going very good between the two of them. However, that love story did not last for very long. When New Orleans eventually returned to normalcy, so did the lives of all of its residents. Except conditions and circumstances were now even more challenging than before. And as Zack and Addie were forced back into a life that they never wanted to begin with, they became unhappy yet again. Their altruism became replaced with frustration. Charitable efforts now turned into arguments, and the very purpose that kept the two together slowly started to unravel. From here on out, their relationship became on again, off again, and fights erupted in front of friends quite frequently. To add to this, Addie didn't seem to like Zack's children getting in the way of her, and it seems that he didn't either. Now this is where the relationship goes from bad to even worse.
Do what? They had a problem with kids coming before her? Man, kids come before anything and everything, bro. Get the fuck over it. That's life.
Apparently, their drug and alcohol abuse skyrocketed, and friends couldn't even tell if the two were ever sober or not. By now, the two had been together for just a little bit over a year, and so it is safe to say that the honeymoon phase was not only over, but they were now looking at each other in a more realistic light. In a final effort to repair their already dying relationship, the two decided to move in together to 826 North Rampart Street. But even that process was riddled with issues. So, I'm going to talk about this house, but only for a brief moment. The main reason being is because I'm not superstitious. The home they moved into used to be a spiritual voodoo temple, which led many to believe that maybe there were evil and dark forces playing on both Zack and Addie.
Possibly.
I mean, in reality, it's just an old Creole cottage which was built in 1829. With its old architecture and carpentry, it is now a listed building, meaning it must be kept to its original condition. When Zack and Addie rented it out, the building had been separated into an upstairs apartment and a downstairs shop. And funny enough, it survived Hurricane Katrina, despite being only 1 meter above sea level. So, although the two signed the lease together, it was only a few days later that Addie discreetly approached the landlord to ask if Zack could be taken off of the contract. The reason for this is because that Addie suspected that Zack was actually cheating on her, and she was not prepared to live with this man if that actually were the case. But unfortunately, her landlord refused this request. Instead, he told her to go back home and try to reconcile with her boyfriend. However, unknown to the landlord at the time, this would actually be the last time that Addie was ever seen alive, because after this, she returned home and then disappeared. On the evening
Not
of
really.
October the 4th,
She's still there, bruh.
2006, and after returning home, Addie was never heard from again. It is believed that she confronted Zack about his affair and told him to get out. You see, Addie had been abused by multiple men before and had finally decided that enough was enough.
Poor
But
thing.
unfortunately, Zack had other plans. At 1 AM on the morning of October the 5th, he strangled his girlfriend to death. In his drunk state, he then passed out next to her lifeless body, and after coming around, he allegedly proceeded to do other things to her. The man then got up and went to work as if nothing had happened, and although he appeared quiet around his colleagues, nobody thought too much of it. Colleagues and friends would often ask him where his girlfriend was, but he would correct them and say ex-girlfriend. You see, Zack claimed that she had broken up with him and had already moved back to North Carolina. And although some were rather skeptical of this story, most of them accepted it. Over the course of the next few days, Zack would continue with his nightmarish plan. He dismembered Addie's body with a hacksaw in the bathtub, placing some of her limbs in the refrigerator while placing others in the oven and on the stove. His sick plan initially was to separate Bowen from the rest of her body, so she could be disposed of more quickly. However, Zack would eventually change his mind after realizing that the job was too big. Instead, after coming to terms with all of the emotional pain and consequences, he decided that he would spend all of his money and live out the rest of his days with indulgence. In an effort to conceal the corpse that he now shared a home with, he kept the air conditioning on 24/7. The house remained around 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius for the next several days. And between October the 5th and October the 17th, that being almost 2 full weeks after Addie's death, he blew through his entire bank account and spent more than $1,500 on good food, alcohol, drugs, and sex. And when his bank balance finally hit zero, well, he decided that he too had to go. Shortly before his death, Zack left an entry in Addie's diary. In it, he wrote, "Today is Monday the 16th of October, 2 AM. I killed her at 1 AM on Thursday the 5th of October. I very calmly strangled her. It was very quick. Halfway through the task, I stopped and thought about what I was doing. The decision to halt the first idea and move to plan B, that being the crime scene you are now in, came after a while. I scared myself, not by the action of calmly strangling the woman I loved for 1.5 years and then desecrating her body, but by my entire lack of remorse. I've known for forever how horrible of a person I am. Ask anyone. And decided to quit my jobs and spend the $1,500 cash I had being happy until I killed myself. So, that's what I did. Good food, good drugs, good strippers, good friends, and any loose ends I may have had. I didn't contact any of my family, so that'll explain the shock, and had a fantastic time living out my days. It's just about time now." Zack then wrote on the wall saying, "I'm a total failure" on one of them and "look in the oven" on another. He also wrote, "Call Lana Bowen" and "I love her."
Man. See, this is why I like Coffeehouse Crime, man. I've heard this story I don't know how many times. Man. Like, ooh. This is what I'm talking about. Like, I feel bad for dude because of all the shit he's been through and he never got the help he really needed or anything and just turned to drugs. And drugs is never the choice. It's never a good option, ever. Just smoke you some weed and take a nap, do whatever. But once you get into the addictions and shit, nothing's ever going to get better. But all the shit this poor dude was going through, the PTSD, being in the middle of Hurricane Katrina, which probably made it 10 times worse. You know, everyone says it was like a war zone, and that can bring up shit even though he doesn't realize it. I didn't know he had kids though. I may have known. I don't know. That's new. Maybe.
After that, Zack then walked just over half a mile to the Omni Royal Orleans Hotel, where he sat down at the bar and had one final drink while he reflected on his life. And by 8:30 PM, he had ended it. As we know, officers soon found him afterwards, where they also found a letter and a pair of keys to his apartment. In full, this letter read, "This is not accidental. I had to take my own life to pay for the one I took. If you send a patrol car to 826 North Rampart Street, you will find the dismembered corpse of my girlfriend Addie in the oven, on the stove, and in the fridge, and a full signed confession from myself, Zack Bowen." Officers soon found Addie's body parts scattered throughout the apartment, with Zack's chilling words spray painted across the walls. Now, obviously, with Zack dead, there are no legal or court proceedings. However, there are several interesting side notes that are worth talking about in this story. So, there is one giant elephant in the room here that we absolutely must address. And of course, that is Zack's more than likely diagnosis of PTSD. Now, I know that people love to call a murderer a monster and then simply be done with the story. However, there were some incredibly messed up things going on in Zack's head. Both dysfunctional and avoidable, and also completely unavoidable. We all know that Zack seems to have a rather difficult childhood. However, it was his time in the military that seemed to really shift his personality and his behaviour. Experiencing multiple gruesome deaths, especially when some of those are people that you loved and cared about, must have been extraordinarily traumatic. And I can absolutely see how this would develop into a severe case of PTSD. Now, I'm not going to stand here and pretend to know what it's like to be a Marine or someone who suffers from severe PTSD. However,
But we all know what it's like to care, to have a heart. Like, we as normal people go through fucked up shit every day, and sometimes it's a little hard for us to handle, let alone being someone who was overseas, away from everything he knows and loves, and seeing shit that people don't even need to know about. Yeah. It's...
Proof is in the pudding. Many soldiers seem to experience post-traumatic stress disorder after returning from service.
And they should receive better help, but
the obvious
they don't.
Ones, such as flashbacks, nightmares, and guilt.
It's always a fight. Man, and that breaks my heart. Like, these poor souls go over there. Men, women alike go overseas, enlist in the military to put their lives on the line to make it to where we are free to do what we do every day. And when they come back, it is so difficult for any of them to even get the help that they deserve. It's disgusting. We should take much, much better care of the people who defend our freedom, you know? They put their life on the line. That's no easy task. That is one of the most selfless things anyone can ever do.
More specific to Zack's case, it also includes severe self-hatred and extreme anger. Mixing this in with his decision to abuse drugs and alcohol, which, as we know, are behaviour-altering substances, and not receiving any support from the military after being discharged. Well, those two things in combination with his PTSD, it is quite clear to see how he became a dangerous man in the years following his service. Addie Hall is a victim through and through. However, friends had previously commented on her explosive and aggressive energy while under the influence. She had experienced a very traumatic life, and so it is perfectly understandable why she felt the need to protect herself so fiercely. In his vulnerable state of mind, it is likely that Zack simply couldn't handle it, and that these things likely contributed towards the perfect recipe for disaster. Until finally, he snapped. In the wake of this case, Addie's and Zack's apartment became somewhat...
So basically the storm within his self was just as bad as the storm that was going on around them. That's scary to think.
...of a problem for residents. The landlord and various tenants have all reported paranormal activity coming from the apartment.
Ghost adventures.
And it is said that both Zack and Addie haunt the place to this very day. There have been dozens of reports, not just by tenants, but also passers-by, feeling as if they are being watched. Others have said they could hear voices through the walls, and strange sightings of figures in the window. Honestly, it depends if you're superstitious or not. But either way, this sounds absolutely terrifying. To make things even worse, but on the morning of February the 1st, 2016, the apartment's tenants reported the smell of smoke emanating from the voodoo temple beneath them. Feeling worried, they decided to call the fire department, and as it turns out, an electrical fire had broken out beneath them. And although everyone was safe, the entire temple and some of the apartment went up in flames, therefore ending the apartment's long string of tenants. In the aftermath of the fire, the entire building was refurbished into a museum, which to this day is known as Bloody Mary's Tours, the Haunted Museum, and the Voodoo Shop. Now, perhaps this is a strange result of our morbid fascination with death and murder, but essentially, the place has been turned into an exact replica of Zack and Addie's apartment, with the original bathtub and appliances used in her murder still existing to this day. This was a rather controversial move by the owner, who was sure to upset some locals and many of Zack's and Addie's families. But despite everything, it still operates.
Yeah, Bloody Mary don't give a shit, bro.
With so much poverty, pain, death, and damage to 826 North Rampart Street, I think it's just about time to demolish it and start again. But then again, I guess it would be a shame to lose that old American architecture if you can look past the dinginess. Now, here's a bizarre side note, but if you've been watching me for a while, you will likely remember the case of Jaron Lockhart, who, tragically, was dismembered by a very dysfunctional couple. Well, it turns out that one of her murderers, who was named Margaret Sanchez, was actually one of Addie's friends, which is a very eerie coincidence. The strange thing is that Addie's death was several years before Jaron's murder, meaning that Margaret must have experienced the pain, confusion, and turmoil of a friend not only being murdered, but also dismembered, and then went to do the exact same thing. Anyway, folks, I'm gonna wrap this case up here today. Before I go...
Oh, lordy, Adrian. See, that's why I love stories. Well, you can hear them 1,001 times, and depending on the storyteller, it's like hearing it all over again for the first time, and I love it. All right, I really enjoyed today's video. If you guys enjoyed today's video as much as I did, please go down there, leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow more than you think. While you're down there, if you want, go on over and slap that subscribe button, become part of the B5 Nation. We do some crazy stuff here. If you want to know when that crazy stuff happens, ding that bell and turn on all notifications. That way you can always know when I'm there. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Man, it was like the perfect storm within and without. Ooh, that is a good movie. I'm going to have to watch that. The Perfect Storm. That was good.